Um, Annabel, thank you for joining us. And again, I do expect more of our crew to filter in over the next few minutes, but we have been having our attendance drop off during the summer,
Yes.
which I suppose hopefully speaks to people having lots of exciting things to do. But we're very anxious to hear what you have to speak to us about. For the benefit of the group, Annabel has told me she does have a hard stop at 10 a.m. our time. So we'll keep that in mind. And of course, we'll be, as Martin has just indicated, we've started a recording of this. So, you know, the benefit of people attending, can tell everybody else how wonderful it was and that they will check out the recording afterwards. Right. With that, Annabel, let me turn it over to you. And Martin, have you set her up as co-host so she can share a screen if she wants to?
I'll do that right now.
No, I'm not. I don't have any PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, good. All right. Great.
You're stuck with me as the PowerPoint today.
Oh, that's just fine.
Well, first of all, delighted to meet fellow people from Natick. I live in 5 South Lincoln Street. Some of you know. A very strange street because
That's right around the block from me. That's amazing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, on one side it's called Water Street and the other side is called River Street, and in the middle we have South Lincoln Street. But anyway.
I'm on Water Street, by the way.
So I'll just say 3 sentences about myself. I come from South Africa, where I trained as a CPA, and then I went to live in England, London, and was there for many years, and did my MBA, went into the corporate world, became one of those horrid, dreadful investment bankers. I hope there's nobody on the call here is an investment banker. Anyway, if you are, been there, know a little bit about that. And then left England, obviously, and came to live in the United States. And my first stop, my first port of call, was I attended the Western Jesuit Seminary for nearly 3 years. And then went on to BU and studied comparative religion and ethics. So you can tell I have a very varied background, and I probably had at least 50 careers. And I will not, take your time and bore you with taking you through all of them. However, the reason I think it's good that I give you that mixed background is because what I'm going to share with you, you'll see covers a broad terrain. What I do now is I do corporate consulting, I do coaching, I do mindfulness, that's how I met Cindy, and increasingly there is a demand for sort of spiritual counseling. So it's a kind of range of of the mischief that I get up to. So I'm going to talk with you today, or share with you my thoughts on the importance of new realities and the significance of how we do and don't respond. So the first thing I want you to just set out before you is, what do I mean by new realities? New realities are always arriving. Every moment of the day, things are changing. That's why you rush to your Facebook. That's why you rush to the websites, you rush to CNN, because you want to know what's new. New realities are arriving not only on the macro scale, but on the micro scale. In your family, people get ill, people get better, people, have fender benders, people win awards. New realities are always arriving. Now, the way we respond to new realities largely determines our lives, because the new realities that I've mentioned to you are sort of very mundane ones, but then there are new realities called COVID, and then new realities called the war, and now we've got inflation, and then we've got Brexit, and we've got all of these significant new realities. And in your private life, you might have significant new realities too. Some of them you will define either as good ones and some of them as not good ones. So the first point is new realities are always arriving. The next point is that new realities arrive like a tsunami on the horizon. They arrive slowly and surreptitiously. COVID, we knew about, but we only reacted months later. The war, Mr. Putin has been warning us and gave Mr. Zelensky a very specific warning in February 2021. And then we got all a big surprise. Inflation, Mr. Biden, thank you, handed out gazillions of money. And a lot of people in the financial sector said, beware, this is going to create a terrible inflationary spiral, 2020. Here we're going, inflation. So let me just back up and say new realities arrive surreptitiously. Once they've hit the newspaper or the website or CNN or Fox, they're not a new reality anymore, but we treat them as such. They're old realities. New realities arrive as a hunch, as an intuition, as a whisper, as a gossip, as a small column in some obscure magazine, as in your gut when you're thinking, don't get into this relationship, but you do. Don't buy that car, but you do. I do. We all do. So the way that we are observant to new realities has a significant impact on our lives. Now, this tsunami called new realities that keeps arriving suddenly is there, and we say, ooh, tsunami, aka COVID, aka war. Just now it'll be China and Taiwan, and we all say, big surprise. And the problem is when the tsunami is right on top of us, our options are exceedingly limited. It's like the person on the surfboard who doesn't ride the wave at the right moment. The sooner we catch the arrival of new realities, the more options we have. Now, here's another problem, is once the new reality hits, call it COVID, call it the war, call it whatever you want to call, think in your own life, we are so preoccupied with dealing with the new reality, as we call it, which is really an old reality, that we are totally taken up in reactive solving, problem solving. Quickly get a mask, quickly get a vaccine, quickly send bombs, quickly. How long has Germany been buying oil from Russia? How long have we known that Russia controls so much of Eastern Europe? No surprise. And again, think in your own lives. Your sudden surprise that your daughter or son isn't going to do medicine, but actually wants to become a dancer. A sudden surprise, I don't know, whatever it might be, and I can only obviously think of my own life. So new realities are always arriving. New realities are only identifiable if we're paying attention. And you see, we're not paying attention. We're busy with Facebook. We're busy with Netflix. We're busy worrying about whatever we're worrying about. We're not only not observant, we have screens, we have filters, and that we have to have because we cannot take in the whole world. But you see, if you have no interest in Africa, let's say, it wouldn't occur to you to think about, what about this monkeypox thing or this Ebola that has now started in Africa? You wouldn't even enter because you've screened it out, or if you're not interested in Norway or Sweden or whatever. So we screen out a lot of information that's arriving. And also we're exceedingly unobservant. And then there's the third point. We are willfully ignorant. We choose not to see what we don't want to see. Somehow we think, no, my intuition's wrong. Somewhere we think, oh my God, no, that's just a gut. Let's wait and see, our favorite phrase. Let's wait and see. Now you see, this hits us personally, and of course our politicians are caught up in it enormously. They are caught up in it enormously for their own lives, but they too, not only are they unobservant, and frequently they also don't know how to spell Ukraine, but we won't go into that. They too are caught up with not wanting to identify unpalatable realities, because they will lose their constituency. They will lose their seat on the board at Morgan Stanley. They will lose whatever it is they're going to, their vested interests. They will lose their popularity. And then there's another problem. With new realities, we often don't know. We're in the world of uncertainty. And how can you say to people, there's a new reality coming, but really I'm uncertain how to define it, how to frame it, and what to do about it. So let's wait till the new reality hits us on the head, and then we'll all decide what we're going to do about it. That's how we live our lives. Now, here's the real big whammy. While we're ignoring and all of this, and of course I'm dramatizing to effect, and it's on the continuum and so on, while we are now dealing with our reactivity of these things that we are defining as new realities, real new realities are arriving on the horizon that we're not even looking at because we're so busy worrying about inflation. Will the Fed put up the interest rates? What'll happen to our mortgage? What'll happen to the student loans? Blah, 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 blah. So the next new reality, we aren't even looking. Do you know when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring?
1962.
And we are still talking, thank you, Carrie, about climate change. We are still talking about a whole new reality, about looking after the earth. We pick and choose our realities, the ones that we're going to respond to, and then usually there's some social, political consensuality about how we're going to frame this. Now, this, as you know, has a huge impact for us on the global, national, social, societal, even our town, state, and of course, personally. And then we try to live mindfully, and we say, live in the present, whack on the head, present, whack on the head. And it's very hard because we're so caught up in dealing with these so-called new realities. But in between, we have time for Netflix, and we have time for TikTok, or whatever they call these things, and social media. So that's my first salvo.
It's quite a salvo.
And
Enough.
enough. All right. Well, time for GNT. Well, I could have one here in Ireland. You can't. It's only 9:15. Now, I could take a breather there, or you might want a breather. You might want to step outside and breathe a little bit, or I could continue. Any comments? Let me give you a chance to sort of react, comment, disagree, whatever.
Well, what you've said resonates a lot with I think, kind of this feeling of despair sometimes that we feel of just, there's so much going on and what can we even do about it? I'm hoping you're setting the stage for some actionable items. So I'm waiting with bated breath myself.
Ditto.
Aha. Well, let's see. Any other comments, questions?
It seems as though there's so much going on that we can't possibly follow it all. So everybody kind of is a specialist now. And I follow certain things and I ignore other things. And then there are things that maybe I should have known were coming down that I didn't know. So, what can we do other than information overload?
Ricky?
Thank you.
Well,
No, I think, sorry.
First of all, let me say I came in a smidge late, so I missed your initial introduction, but I'm fascinated. I agree with the landscape that you paint. And my question is, given that landscape, what is the most important thread to follow if one is going to live an intentional life?
That's a great question.
I'm good at that. I'm not so good at the answers.
Yeah, we're all good at the questions. We all want someone else to give us the answers. And that's why we get some very strange people in power, because they convince us they have the answers.
Right.
Then we'll try and stay away from politics if we can. Cindy.
Yeah, so just hearing everybody else respond, I've got sort of an idea that there's leaders on a national level, there's leaders on a local level, state level, and in this group there, I would say pretty much everybody except me is a leader on the local level. And so if you're a leader in different areas, or you're a leader in your family, say, then does that change the kinds of things that you should be paying attention to, so that you can be most effective in your, like kind of what Martin was saying of, I mean, clearly there's a risk if you're not paying attention to something that's going to impact you, but at the same time, to be effective in your own domain, maybe that's part of how we are, is to like focus on what we can control ourselves and what we have the resources to do. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud there.
Okay, well, let me try and respond to a few comments, to a few of your points. Have I left anybody out? Did anybody else want to say anything? Sorry, the Zoom, these little Zoom boxes, they're very, they jump around, 1 minute you're down in this corner and 1 minute you're up there. You've got to pay attention now. Okay, so let me begin by, first of all, defining this word leadership. When we talk about leadership, what we really are referring to lead, which means movement. And movement means to go somewhere. So to lead is to move oneself. I lead my own life. And I may take on the role of leading others. So everybody leads, for better or not. And leadership is a role once we do it for others. It's not a person. We love to say they're leaders, but no, actually that's putting them in some kind of elite class, which we don't really want to do. They are people who are exercising leadership. Exercising leadership means moving people physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually to new places. Where are those new places? Responding to changing reality. If the war is coming from the east, you don't move people to the west. So leadership, the role of leadership, and we take that up with one another. You maybe do that in Natick, and I'm thrilled to meet you. And we do that at home. And at different times, different people exercise leadership depending upon their particular strengths, their valiancy, their interests. So right there, we make a mistake of always relying on one person. That's the leader, he or she. Now, as you know, and that's why we have Congress and all these people, and that's why you have committees and all of this sort of thing. The idea is, which comes back to how do we deal with information overload? That's always a risk. And that is why all of this data that everybody is so in love with is actually a smokescreen. It often doesn't tell us very much. We have to do the interpreting. And what good leadership is about sharing, probing, inviting, discussing these nudges, hints, gut feeling, intuition, with other people, and typically with other people who come from different perspectives. So, and that you don't really get when you read the newspaper. I mean, you typically buy this newspaper and it's got those kind of perspectives or that and those. But what you really want to do is spend time at the grassroots saying to people, you know, I have a hunch. Now we're talking. My intuition tells me. Did you notice? When were you last in Slovakia or the Ukraine but no, we stick to our Saturdays and Sundays. We play tennis and we play golf and we go to the gym with the same people. Then we have big things that says diversity and inclusion. They must have them. There you are, diversity and inclusion. That's why we need to speak to everybody. Often, the people who have the biggest hunches is the guy who cleans the warehouse and suddenly notices that these certain types of boxes are not coming anymore. And it's only 3, 4, 5 weeks later when the computer tells somebody that they're short of boxes that we suddenly say, oh, we have a supply problem. There are lots of examples like that. So we need to be awake, observant, interested, and speak and explore with many different people of every color, of every ethnicity, of every perspective. That's diversity, and that's inclusion. And that will also open our minds. And that will help us not screen in such a limited way. But the problem of information overload, the problem of missing key new realities always exists. And there's always the black swan as we know it, the out of the blue, very strange occurrence. Although most people have found that black swans are usually in some way, everything is in some way predictable. Nothing comes totally out of the blue. But, you know, let's say we miss 20 or 30 or 40 or 50%, we're doing okay, but we typically miss 80%. And then here's the other piece. Once we are apprised of a new reality, and particularly if it is an unpalatable one, we resist it. We say that can't really be true. Is it that bad? Can't really be about me. They can't really mean that. Oh no, that only affects the people in Framingham, not in Native. But everything affects everything else. We are terrible in denying, deferring, distracting, detracting from anything that is unpalatable. Instead of grabbing it by the throat, we fend it off. And I just ask you for a minute, I can think about in my own life. How many, if I sit here now, many, many decades down the road, the times I can look back and say, if only I had not ... Listen to ... Gone there ... Not gone there ... And I doubt that I'm the only one. And often we patch up those if onlys with children and houses and holidays and more distractions, instead of learning from them. Now, here's the piece why new realities are so challenging. New realities, and I want you to think about, let's say, COVID as an example. They challenge 5 interrelated things. The first thing about new, and it might be big or small, right? It might be significant or insignificant. It's on a continuum. The first thing that new realities challenge us is our self-understanding, our self-understanding, our self-esteem, the way we see ourselves in the world. New reality, I lost my job, or inflation, so whatever. New reality, I got a new car, a brand new BMW. Everything for what we would define good or bad, and that's a whole other question. Self-understanding, self-esteem. The second thing, our value system is challenged. Think of LGBT, I can never say all those, LGBT, gay marriage, abortion, whatever you wanted to, and even their abortion. New reality, are you kidding me? It's been dangled over the razor's edge for years now. Value, our value system. Do we go to war? Don't we go to war? The third thing, our sense of competence. How will I manage in this new world with these new realities? Will I be the same marvelous Martin, Brian, Carrie, Sally, Carol, Cindy, Erica, Pat, Doug, and Sarah, and Annabel that I was in the old reality? Or will I have to learn some new things and things I would rather not learn? I couldn't be bothered to learn. I'm too frightened to learn. Fourth thing, my feeling of power. My feeling of, am I autonomous, somehow in control? And the fifth thing is my relationships. Now, these 5 are intertwined, some more, some less. So let's take good old COVID and the masks. My self-understanding. What? You want me to walk around with a mask so no one can see my face all the time, everywhere? The great America that's so powerful has to walk around. I'm an American, I'm free. You don't tell me to wear masks. You don't tell me to isolate. Isolate? That's not how I live. I see my grandchildren, I hug them. How am I going to live? My value system. I'm going to wear masks and have vaccines prescribed by somebody else. I'm going to tell my employees, my family, they can't work with me. They can't stay in my house unless they have vaccines. Competence. Now I'm at home. What am I going to do? Everything's going to change. I'm not that good on Zoom or whatever and all these things. I have to learn, I've now got to become a technology buff. What about the people? Yeah, you can keep going on. My sense of power, what do you mean? Americans, we're you know, the Statue of Liberty, freedom. How can this nasty little worm control us? We refuse. We'd all rather die. Well, a lot of us did. Our relationships. How can I have the same relationship with people I don't see? I don't hug. I don't talk to them. I don't meet with them. We only wear masks. So I resist. Or I don't resist, I cope. Now the problem is, with new realities, we don't want to cope. Because coping means that at some level, we're not integrating that we need to change. Coping is a kind of, well, I'll get through this till the pandemic is over. Well, guess what? It ain't over. And never mind, if there's not this pandemic, there'll be something else. So, new realities determine our adaptability. Am I an adaptive person? Can I learn from change? Do I have the courage to be a new person, even if it's only so small? So small each time. Or am I going to be the same old Annabel, longing for the 1960s and the 1970s when we used to do it like that? Well, guess what? It's gone. I now have to adapt. And to adapt means to learn, to unlearn, and to transform. I need a new mindset. I need to say, how can I turn this challenge into an opportunity for growth, for new possibilities? That is leadership. That is leadership at the personal level for my life, leadership for how I participate in my family, leadership at any level, golf club, town, nation, to face new realities as soon as possible, to have the courage to deal with uncertainty, not to distract and go into willful blindness, willful ignorance. To recognize that I'm going to have to really change. And it might only be a small change. We're not, not all new realities are major transformative changes, but they all require a different mindset, a different perspective, a different way of being in the world. And we vote our people in because they're charismatic, because they're going to give us low taxes, because maybe they will do something with healthcare system. Maybe they do or don't support abortion. Maybe they do or don't support whatever. But do we really check out real leadership? Courageous leaders who will help us navigate the seas of change. Can we do that ourselves? By consciously and intentionally looking at just even starting at home with the small things, talking to other people, maybe just looking at our particular interests, but just if you make a difference, and you make a difference, and you make a difference, and you make a difference, it'll affect the system. But we always look at big. We don't have to look big. All we have to do is look into our own lives. So that's the news from Ireland.
Great.
So I find this really interesting. I know a few minutes ago you were mentioning paying attention to your intuition and your gut level. And for myself, at least, that has been a huge battle in my life to learn to trust that. We are so told you need evidence, you need logic. And I'm a scientist. I mean, I totally go for the logic and the science and the evidence and the data and so forth. But when I look back on times in my life when I've struggled, it's always because I wasn't paying attention to my intuition. And I just, it's like, no, that couldn't be what's happening. And I think it's an interesting juxtaposition of learning to recognize almost another way of seeing or another way of gathering information that we don't tend to honor in this society.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and that's, I guess, more an observation than anything else, but it's taken me many, many years to learn to say, I have an intuition, there is something going on, as opposed to I must be crazy.
But when it strays into the political sphere or the public sphere, I mean, how frustrated have a lot of us been, when you, Annabel, when you were personifying the person who won't wear a mask. I just know in my gut this is wrong. I don't care that 1,001 scientists have told us this is what we need to do. I know it's wrong. It's like, so frustrating.
The thing is, first of all, Sarah, thank you for your comment. And that's, that's right on. The thing is, because we don't value intuition as much as we should, and we sort of deny and sort of dilute it, and it's not evidence, is blah, 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 there's no data. Where'd you get that? That sounds illogical, irrational. Our intuition doesn't drop in deeper and deeper, but the more we use our intuition, and by that I'm not talking about just a frivolous gut feel, I have a gut feel, but just really listening, which means being present and paying attention. The better, like anything, it is a capacity, the better it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right on. So I just want to say that. As for what you're saying, Doug, this is the thing. Resistance is fear, as you know. And what is it that people fear? They fear the 5 things that I told you. Most of all, who will I be in this? How will I understand myself in this new world? And the thing is, most people don't realize that that's the fear. they deflect it onto something else. I'm afraid somebody's telling me what to do. I'm afraid that this will become a Nazi state, all this nonsense, because they're not sufficiently in touch. We generally, largely, often do not really know what we're feeling. We know, or let me reword that. We know we're feeling something, but we're not really sure what it's made of. And so we lash out, but the power of resistance is enormous. It's called Calvary, for those of you who know what I'm talking about.
What was that word again?
Calvary,
Oh,
the cross,
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
the
To be
power of a risk. We will rather kill the messenger than deal with an unpalatable message.
Well, it is interesting, it seems to me when you get something that's at least initially unpalatable, you really can go one of two ways. You can say, what's going on here? Or you can like dig in and say, oh, I mean, you mentioned LGBTQ rights. And when Doug and I were in high school, we've known each other since then. If you had asked me, at least, and we went to a high school that had 2,700 people in 3 grades. It was a big school. If you had asked me if I knew a gay person, I would have said no, because nobody was out.
Oh, yeah.
And if you had asked me, should gay people have the right to get married, I would have looked at you like you had 3 heads.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I started thinking about it, and it's like, how does it hurt me as a straight woman for 2 men or 2 women to marry each other? And, I've in my lifetime gone from, you want gay people to get married, you have 3 heads, to why not? And, so, but yet you see this tremendous backlash in the other direction of, we made abortion illegal. Now we can use that precedent to make gay marriage illegal. And it's like, who's getting hurt? Is the sky falling? So.
Well, it's fear.
Fear.
It's fear. How will I self-understand myself? Or how will I understand myself if I come from a very conservative mindset? If I were to suddenly learn that my children are gay. So I've got to shut that down. Worse still, if I were to recognize my own homosexual tendencies. So remember, the greater the resistance, the deeper the change affects people's self-understanding.
Annabel, talk a little bit about willful blindness.
Yeah. Willful blindness is a legal term, actually, where people deliberately claim ignorance, where they may not actually know the facts, but they should have known the facts because of their position, because of their responsibility, perhaps. I'm just trying to think of, there've got to be many examples. I'm just thinking of some of these, for example, these coaches, these Olympic coaches that, or not Olympic, these Olympic coaches that were sexually harassing the athletes, and people saying, they're saying, we didn't know anything about it. So nod is as good as a wink. You know that, I don't know if you know that expression, is when we turn a blind eye. Now, let me give you another example in the corporate world. In the corporate world, everybody jumps up and down about corruption. But as I learned as a young audit clerk with Coopers 100 years ago, if there's corruption in any organization, everybody knows about it. But the story goes like this. I come to you, Sally, and I say, don't you think it's strange? You say, I don't want to know. Don't get me involved. Leave me out of it. I don't ever been in that situation. No people in that, let's not go there. Let's just stick to, because we all at some psychological level know when something is not right. We all do. And we claim, I didn't know. But if I were to ask you in your dreams or your unconscious, that is willful blindness. And regrettably, we do it quite a bit. We say, I had no idea. Really? Nobody can prove, but really in your heart, you had no inkling, no nudge, no prod, no little tinkle tinkle. And you just said, I'm not going to get involved.
I think there's an interesting intersection between that and the gut feel discussion we were just having, because, you know, it seems like there's multiple levels of consciousness, and you can have willful, but you absolutely know something's going on, and you're saying, nope, don't tell me anything about that. I'm gonna keep my distance. But then it can also be your subconscious knows what's going on, and it's doing its best to keep your conscious mind from seeing it. And so it may really feel like a total shock when all of a sudden something comes unavoidably or undisputably to the surface. It's like, I had no idea. Maybe some part of you did, but not a part that you were aware of. And so to your gut feel, exercises in learning how to trust your gut might connect those levels a little bit better.
I'm thinking too of the huge leadership challenges of, say, the President of the United States, who has access to all kinds of information, all kinds of studies, all kinds of authorities. And I'm thinking about Joe Biden, of course, and he's surrounded by people who know a lot. And how, you know, when there's so much knowledge and when there's so much awareness, how can it be channeled into action and decision making? And, you know, how does a good leader sift?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. You're absolutely right. And especially when the experts each have their own agenda. You see, the experts, yes, they know a lot. Yes, they have a lot of insights, but they each want to promulgate their ideas, their agenda, and how to find someone who can rise above the noise and really look at the bigger picture. That is really, you ask a spot-on question. That's really difficult. And that's, again, dare I quote the ancients, why Plato said only philosophers will become good kings, because philosophers live questions, look at the big picture, look at redefining. What does this mean? What does that mean? And philosophers, supposedly, according to Plato, have no political agenda. But we pick experts or charismatic people, or I don't know how, but you need very, very insightful people who can really, and this is where one needs a transpersonal leader. And a transpersonal leader is someone who can lead beyond the ego, whose identity is not ego-driven, but whose identity is driven by a much larger, I want to say, spiritual identity. You know,
Can you give examples of people that you would say throughout human history of people that exemplify this? kind of-
well, there are very few, but I think John Adams was probably he really loved from what I've read and studied and loved the Constitution, and he was willing to step aside and give up his ego. I do think, from the little bit that I've and people have vilified him, but I think Jimmy Carter really was someone who tried to bring that kind of value system. Now, people criticize him for his critical thinking and decision making, and maybe he didn't have the right people around him. And I'm not a political buff, so I want to say that Angela Merkel stands out for me as someone exemplary. What she managed to do with the whole, now she again nobody gets it totally right, but she made many many decisions that took a lot of courage, personal courage. And that's why the people are now, ended up calling her Mutti, calling her mother, because even though they would disagree with her, they could not falter integrity. Integrity meaning wholeness, a desire to look at the bigger picture, to look at the competing interests, and try to find some transcendent middle ground. And I'm not trying to talk here that we're all going to sit on a mountain and look at our belly buttons, that kind of transcendent, but I transcend, rise above the bickering and the local, to always find a new meeting point. And you can't do that if you're fighting the tsunami. You need to have a certain equanimity, a certain poise, a certain serenity, and a certain self-trust, so that you're not fearful. And we're fearful, unfortunately. And maybe we could be a little less fearful, a little bit more observant, just a little bit, and you a little bit, and you a little bit, me a little bit already is quite good. And the only way is that you take self-accountability through self-awareness and self-accountability. How am I respond? Never mind all of these people and Fox and CNN and ABC and EFG and all these people. How am I handling the changing world? My new realities. How am I handling?
Carol, were you looking to make a comment?
I've been thinking then about Joe Biden going to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And maybe thinking that this might be an example of having your own self-confidence and having him filtering out what the competing elements are that are going on and choosing to do that. We all know about Jacoby, the journalist and horror that he went through, and it brought back all of that.
Yeah.
Anyways, and probably for so many others.
Yeah.
And yet I am thinking that Biden is looking more in the bigger sense of our energy issues and what our our country needs right now. I don't know. I'm not a politician of that nature, but I do like to watch how people make decisions, and including myself in terms of decision making.
Yeah.
And I know I've had competing elements in my own life, and when it came down to the final decisions, I had to make them myself and live with the consequences of them.
Mhm.
Some of which turned out to be good, some of which turned out to be rather traumatic, others in time resolved itself in a better way, but you had to wait and be patient. Yeah, we probably all have these episodes in our own lives.
We do. That's the way of life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't comment about Mr. Biden's trip specifically. You know, we you know, the problem, well, it's a problem and it's a reality, is that we're all looking after our own self-interest, right? And nation states are looking after their own self-interest. And this is where I think we get into a lot of trouble. We talk about an interconnected global world, but it has a lot of conditions to it. It isn't really an interconnected global world in a true harmonious sense. It's how can we make this, how can we produce as much good as possible, sell as many goods as possible, and take care of our own nation. And unfortunately, I don't know how that would ever come to pass, that there would be sufficient leaders of countries that would say, why don't we stop looking after the nation state and look after the world? Because who would vote them into power? You'd say, well, what about my heating bill? And what about my gas bill? And what about, my inflation? What about the job? And what about employment rate and all that? So we're stuck. We've got ourselves stuck. And we become so dependent on mass production. We are so dependent on volume. I drive past car lots and I wonder who is ever going to buy all those cars? Who? And you go past these clothing stores with gazillion jeans and t-shirts, and who is ever going to buy all those clothes? And that's just here. And if you go to the UK, you've got all these too. And if you go to everywhere. So what are we going to, and then prices are going up and something has got to crash. And it's got to crash big, because I think we need a very, very big reorganization.
Well, I see that it's the top of the hour. Do you want to expand on any closing comments, Annabel, or is that pretty much?
Well, I've done a lot of talking. I hope I gave you enough space to ask questions or whatever. I hope, even though this might have sounded a very cheerio, Carol.
Yeah, could you put your email in the chat in case we come up with things and we can maybe reach out to you?
You can, of course. I will do that.
Thank
And your phone number.
And my phone number. Very
Yes.
good. Well,
Because-
okay. Well, let me just say, I will be doing a course on leadership in September. I do this from time to time. And it's a 4-week course on Zoom. And some of my corporate people come, some other come. I'm quite happy to send you an invite and to extend to you, I always say to people, particularly now, scholarships, whatever. So I wouldn't, if you're not, if anybody here head of Microsoft, any of you not in the corporate world, I certainly will do so, But if this is something of interest to you, you would be most welcome to join. And you can most certainly, Doug, I can, why don't I send you the details and you can send it out if
That would be
okay.
terrific. Yeah, I'll be sending a follow-up email to this session in a day or two.
Yeah.
So if you could
Okay.
do that later today, if you get a chance, that would be great.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And I will certainly, well, Doug, you've got my email, right?
Yes, that's right. So I can pass that along.
Would you mind sending it out? And I can sort of send you my telephone number. If you phone my telephone number, you won't get me till the 1st of September because I'm here in Ireland, but I will get an email. You may certainly email me.
Yeah, I think we could share your email for now. And if you can share that information about the course in September, that would be great.
Can certainly do that.
Yeah.
So let me just make sure that anybody have any last questions? Elaine?
Kerry has his hand up.
Well, it's not a question. I just want to say this is a fascinating thing and a dose of reality, in that I thought your whole presentation could be sort of wrapped up into an outline, dare I say, and a syllabus for a master's degree course. It was just amazing. Great deal of information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in fact, it is a master's. Let me just say, yeah. But thank you, Kerry. I appreciate the kind words.
I just wanted to thank Cindy for recommending this program, bringing you here.
Cindy,
That's
it's
right.
all your fault.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much.
What you call serendipity. 5 Lincoln Street and 5 Lincoln Street South. My newspaper.
One block away, and I never knew you.
Anyway, I'm so delighted to meet you. And when I'm back in Natick, maybe I can meet you somewhere in the flesh.
That would be great.
That would be
Yeah. We keep talking about getting this group together in real life instead of just electronically. So
Yeah.
maybe that will happen after Labor Day.
It started, didn't it start in person?
Absolutely.
It did.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Thanks to Pat. Yeah.
Yep.
All
Yeah.
right. Well,
I as I say, delighted to meet you all, and I wish you well with all the new realities that we are bombarded with, and we're all trying to swim with a snorkel, get through it. I wish you all well. Thank you so much.
Thank you
All right.
again.
Thank you,
Okay.
Annabelle.
Okay, bye for now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.